And then the postman turned up and he was like, "Are you going to the Olympics?" And I literally shut the door and burst into tears. And I was like, time for a sports psychology session. Previously, I've only ever raced when I felt really ready for it. I did not feel ready for this at all. I found out in the least glamorous way you can imagine, in a Fiat 500 rental car in a car park.
Welcome back to 5 Miles Easy. It's official. Rose has been selected to represent Great Britain at the 2024 Olympics in Paris. I know there's been a lot of uncertainty over the last few months, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So today we're going to find out all about it. Rose, firstly, the biggest congratulations to you. I'm so proud. I'm sure all the listeners are so proud of you. You've worked so hard for this and definitely deserve all the success. So can't wait to hear more about what's been going on the last few months, because I feel like we've kept things quite quiet about your journey since Chicago. So we know you ran 2:23 at Chicago Marathon, which is an Olympic qualifying time. What happened from there? Because you got a time that qualifies you for the Olympics, but then how do you get selected to represent Great Britain at the Olympics? What happened next?
Okay, so taking it back to after Chicago. In summary, I would say it's definitely been a bit of a roller coaster journey up until now, which at times has been quite challenging. But I have to say, looking back now, everything's said and done, and obviously I have got the spot for Paris. I sort of feel like it makes it sweeter because it has required a lot of hard work and mental resilience to get through it. But okay, let's go back to Chicago. After Chicago, I actually feel like I bounced back really well, came off the race well, and got back to training sensibly, but kind of, I think, quicker than we expected. In terms of my sessions were pretty good after a few weeks. So had a great few weeks, and then I went to Albuquerque for an altitude training camp, which also was a really good camp. I think I was probably doing the best training I've ever done out there. I didn't do loads of marathon specific stuff just because I wasn't at any point planning to do a spring marathon, even though there were some rumors about me doing Seville, which I actually never signed up to Seville, so not quite sure how that came about. But I was never really planning to do a spring marathon, so it was more shorter distance focused work. But having said that, it was going really well and all my sessions were great. Then the classic situation of when you're at your absolute fittest and flying, you have to be super careful, especially at altitude. And I think looking back at my training, I probably made a couple of not disastrous mistakes, but cumulatively a few mistakes, which then sent the roller coaster down the hill. So it started with Houston half, where I was actually feeling great going into Houston, which made it extremely frustrating that I didn't end up racing. Well, I started and dropped out after a few miles because I had food poisoning / stomach bug, not quite sure which one it was, but essentially feeling very, very unwell at about 2 a.m. the night before the race. And I tried to pull it together. I got some anti-sickness tablets, and I can't remember if we kind of debriefed on this before, but essentially I tried to give it a go and it just did not happen.
Why were you doing Houston half marathon in the first place?
I was doing Houston half to prove fit. So this is all part of the Olympic selection process. I ran my qualifying time in Chicago, which I guess is the biggest hurdle out of the way. So you have to get the standard. So I did that in Chicago. But because I ran that marathon in 2023 and the Olympics 2024, I then have to prove fit in 2024, which proving fit, there's no kind of set way to do it specifically, but it's normally do a half marathon or some other race that kind of demonstrates that you don't have to be in the shape of your life, but demonstrates you're on a good path, you're running well, you could be ready for a great race in August. So that was why I scheduled in Houston. On paper, it was all looking like it was going to be going really well, and I was going to tick that box. Thought I could do a good PB, but yeah, it wasn't to be.
That's so frustrating, isn't it? It's always the worst timing of those things when you feel in amazing shape and then there's just one thing slightly out of your control that just goes wrong for you on the day.
Exactly, but it's kind of all part of sport,
Yeah.
and there's always going to be that one day, and I just think, well, thank God it wasn't Chicago.
Yeah.
It could have been worse.
It could have been. But how did you feel after that? Because then are you suddenly like, well, that I was trying to prove that I'm fit. Now I have to still do it again because I've missed that chance.
Exactly. So that was the challenge, and I think because I had that pressure, I then kind of made the first mistake of this whole process was trying to rush back. And because I was at altitude, and I think retrospectively, maybe I was like really riding that line. It took me a really long time to recover, which is actually really unlike me. And it did kind of stress me out at the time because normally I'm super resilient with like I hardly ever get ill. And when I do, I kind of feel like I bounce back. I'm not the sort of, I've never had this situation where I feel like I'm taking longer than I should to recover from that kind of illness.
Yeah.
And so it kind of really, I don't know, it did give me a bit of a wobble because I was thinking, why is this happening? But I think looking back, it probably was. I was just already really riding the line. And then I got sick. And then I was at altitude, which does take more out of you. And it just took me longer to bounce back. But I think the mistake was kind of trying to force it. And I kept looking at races at a couple of weeks and where I'm like, right, I'm going to try and make this. And it just, race after race didn't happen.
Did you feel motivated with training at the time? Were you motivated by the prospect of having a race to prove fitness, or was it hard not knowing your big goal race, whether it be the Olympics or something else at the time? You don't have that certainty of what your big goal is.
I was motivated in training, but I think I never really had sessions where I turned up and didn't want to do them. But it was just that constant underlying stress of the bigger picture and why I was doing the race. Whereas I think normally the races are kind of just for me. And, you know, it's just because I want to go and get a PB and put my work into practice. Whereas this was, okay, I've got to hit this deadline.
Yeah.
And even if I'm not ready for it. So it did add a very different element to it and a very different kind of strategy. So, and it did turn into a pretty stressful few months.
How did you deal with the stress of that? Because presumably you felt some pressure as well internally and maybe external pressure, even though it may have been for good reason, you may interpret that and change it into pressure on yourself.
Yeah, it definitely got to me at points. And I think it actually got worse because through this process of trying to force it, I then made another mistake of essentially doing too much track volume. And I ended up getting a bit of tendonitis in my knee, which again is one of those things I look back and I'm like, it really wasn't that bad, but it did come at the worst possible time. And I didn't even have to, I had a scan on it and everything, and they're like, it's mild tendonitis, but it did affect me, and I did have to take a week off running at the worst possible time, which I know does not sound much, but when I was already kind of behind the curve, it was just, yeah, it did not help me at all. And then the bigger issue was actually I couldn't really do much half marathon specific stuff because it was the speed work that really aggravated it. So I really was limited in the work that I could do, which probably would have been all right if I was doing a marathon because that kind of tempo work was all right. But doing a half marathon was not ideal. And it was really at that point, I think when I came home from Albuquerque, that I was struggling with my knee and the pressure was on. The first selection had happened. And naturally after that, everyone starts asking you, have you been selected? Why aren't you selected yet? It's constant, like every day. And the thing is, you know, I feel so lucky to have so many people behind me and supporting me. And it's, in some ways, it's lovely to have that. But at the time, I did have some days where I was really starting to feel the pressure of it. And I think I almost kind of lost my perspective a little bit on why I was doing it and what it all meant and other people's opinion on it. And it kind of felt a lot bigger issue than it was.
Yeah, I can imagine that because you appreciate everyone's support, but it's just a constant reminder of I should be achieving this. And you obviously want to achieve it, but it's like the other option is failure.
Yeah.
So you had no distraction really, because if you're facing that every day, you can't even just switch it off because people are going to send those comments to you. So what did you do to help that? Did you have sessions with your sports psychologist to help reframe it?
Yes, that was a big help and actually a real turning point for me. I remember that I had this one really bad day where I had a session the day before and it actually went all right. But I did try to incorporate a bit of the speedier work and it just completely flared up my knee. And then I went out to Wimbledon the next day to do my easy run and I literally didn't make it a mile. And it was just, this was probably 7-8 weeks out, maybe even less than that, 6-7 weeks out from the deadline for proving fit, and I couldn't run a mile of my easy run. And then I got back and 2 people messaged me about selection and like, had I heard anything, like really good friends, you know, just newsy things. How are you doing? Have you heard anything about selection? I was like, oh my God. And then the postman turned up and he was like, are you going to the Olympics? And I literally like shut the door and burst into tears. And I was like, time for a sports psychology session.
Oh my God, bless you.
So yeah, I had a few sessions that really helped me. And I think there were a couple of turning points in my mindset. But one thing that really stuck with me was my sports psychologist said, she was just like, if you make the team, how long do you think people are going to be dining out on your success? Like, sure, people are going to congratulate you, but do you seriously think you're going to be changing everyone's lives by making the team? And I was like, well, no, like, obviously I don't. Like, people are going to be happy for me, but it's going to be like, yeah, you did it. And then they're going to crack on with their lives, quite rightly so. And then she was like, so do you not think the same applies if you don't make the team? Like, probably even less so, because people are just like disappointed for you, but then 5 minutes later are thinking about something else.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's so true. And honestly, it was like a switch just flipped and a weight was lifted off my shoulders. And she really helped me remember why I was doing it all. And it's like, actually, I'm doing it for me.
Yeah.
I'm doing it for the challenge, to see how far I can push my body, because it's following my dreams and doing something that I love doing, and for an amazing experience. So I'm like, I'm not doing it because all my friends and family have been like, you've got to make the Olympic team to make me happy. Which is funny, these things come up and you're like, wow, that's such an obvious thing that I should have thought of. But you just think when you get wrapped up into that headspace, it doesn't come to you.
Yeah. And your friends aren't your friends because of that. You don't have to prove yourself, your worth, through getting selected for the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that really just shifted my mindset and helped me reframe it all, and just, I think, remember the fun in it as well. Was really important.
Yeah, that's so important. So you mentioned 2 spots were taken back in February and there was 1 spot left, and they were doing the selection, the day after London Marathon?
Yeah.
Was it only you in contention for that spot, or were there some other athletes that you were up against that could also have taken that spot?
Yeah, there were. So technically anyone with the qualifying time can go. Before London, there were 3 of us with the standard. So any 3 of us could have been selected. Then you got London Marathon, which at the time, no one actually ended up running the standard from Great Britain, but I didn't know that before. So I was thinking, right, okay, there's at least 3 and then there might be someone from London. In the end, it came down to the 3 of us with the time. And there's a whole process that they go through. There's so many factors that they consider. But one of the key ones is, so there's sort of 2 criteria that you have to meet to even be at the table. One of them is have the standard. The other one is proving fitness. So that was the one that I still had to tick to even get a seat at the table, which is why it was a stressful situation. Assuming you've met those 2 criteria, the whole list of other things that they consider, like world rankings, very complicated system that allocates points for different races, head to head. So if I've raced against the other 2 athletes in the same race, who won. Performance at majors, that's particularly relevant because it's the same sort of environment in that, you know, you're on a very big stage, you're on the elite start line, a lot of people watching the pressure, how do you deal with it? It's all part of it.
Yeah.
And then there are factors like the ability to prepare for the Olympics and what the race is actually going to be like. So like Paris might be hilly. Well, it is hilly. It might be hot, and the ability to prepare for that. So they look at all these factors in the round and basically decide, there's a whole panel, and then they decide like who is the best athlete to represent Great Britain in that particular race.
So interesting. Okay, so you still had to show fitness.
Yes.
Continue on that story.
After I got back and was sort of chasing down different races, I ended up basically having to do a race on the deadline. And it was because I felt ready to race probably the week before, but there wasn't a half marathon that I could do. 10K felt, given that I couldn't really do much of the speed work, it just felt like it was going to be too much of a risk. And a half marathon is actually, we felt, probably a better way of me proving fitness because it's a little bit more towards a marathon. So anyway, I found this half marathon on the deadline, and it was literally go for broke.
Yeah.
The last possible minute.
I don't know how you did that on the last day. I was so scared for you. I knew how much pressure you were under, so I was really trying to keep me talking about it to a minimum. But I was like, I was telling everyone, I was like, I am so scared for this girl. I was like, please don't fuck it up.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend that approach to anyone, but it worked out.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
So, and it was definitely touch and go. To be honest, even 4 weeks out, I think on paper, if you look at my training, you would think, how the hell is she going to do it? Because it really took my knee and like my fitness and getting everything back that long, like up until the deadline to get to it. And even when my knee actually felt better, I felt like I'd almost lost a bit of, I don't know, like motor neuron function, and I just couldn't turn my legs over quicker.
Okay.
Because I hadn't actually done that work for so long. So it really took me like the full amount of time to start seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. And it was literally like the last week of sessions where I was like, okay, this is progressing quite quickly. Like maybe I just had this slither of hope. But quite honestly, I mean, I was back to sessions with my training pal Ben today, and the first thing he said, he was like, I want to say I was never in doubt, but quite honestly.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, yeah, no, I was in doubt too. I think it just shows that it's amazing what your body can do. And it was really interesting, actually. One of the other things that my sports psychologist really helped me with, because I did not feel ready for this race.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a sort of person that I normally only race when I'm really ready, which having said that and now done Nice, I've actually kind of changed my perspective on that, because I got a lot from Nice, a lot of takeaways, a lot of learnings. That's actually like, well, that really benefited me. So maybe I need to change that approach. But previously, I've only ever raced when I felt really ready for it. I did not feel ready for this at all.
You just had to do it.
I had to do it. And that I was kind of struggling with that a bit and thinking I don't feel confident going in. And my sports psychologist, took me through this theory way of thinking on confidence. She's like, okay, you're taking confidence from your splits in sessions. Like, that's only one pillar of confidence. And there are actually some other pillars of confidence that you can go to. So she described 4 facets of confidence. One is looking at training. So the splits, and that's what I was going to and thinking like, oh God, I can't hit these splits for 13 miles. But the other facets you can go to is the wider preparation. So all the other things that I've been doing, I was super conscientious on physio, getting my leg better, recovery. Like, I put everything into it. And I think I was so focused on just wanting to get to that deadline, knowing I'd done everything I could. And so I was like super conscientious with it all. My physio is an absolute legend and just works so hard on my recovery and rehab programs and tweaking everything literally every few days to get the most out of my body and get my leg in the best possible place. So I worked really hard on that. And then the third facet is your past experience. And that one for me is, the fact that not that long ago I ran Chicago, ran a really good race. I'd actually done a really good training block after that. And when I look at it in the grand scheme of things, like this period of not so great training, bumpy ride, was only a really short spell. So it's like my body does have the ability. I haven't completely lost the ability to run suddenly and do well. So I've got to think about all my past experience and go back to races that, you know, I surprised myself or did better than I thought I would, and draw on all of that confidence as well. And then the last facet is looking at other people who inspire you and other people who have, you know, taking this example here, gone out even when they don't feel ready and still put out a good performance. And it's like, well, if they can do it, I can do that too. And so I think just taking that approach, I was able to go into it way more confident than I would have been if I hadn't had that session and hadn't like learned that approach to it. So I do feel like mentally I went in like the best possible way given the circumstances. And to be honest, the race, yeah, it wasn't a PB. It was 2 minutes off my PB. But genuinely, I think it was like the best race I've ever done in terms of mental strength, the way I dealt with it and just the way I executed it. I managed to dig really deep in the last bit, which I sometimes struggle with in the shorter races. I say shorter, I mean anything below a marathon. And yeah, I came away really proud of myself for just giving it everything.
Yeah, it's so incredible. Did you have any parts in that race where you did struggle mentally and you were able to get yourself out of that? Or did you feel pretty good the whole way?
Mentally, I actually felt really good the whole way. And it was because I went in with such a, I guess, rigid strategy of I am not going to, my chimp is going to give me negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. I am not entertaining them today. Absolutely no way. I have a plan. I am executing it. I am thinking of nothing else.
Love it.
And I actually genuinely stuck to that. As we've said so many times on this pod, do not think about how you're feeling. That was my rule for the day. I am not even going there.
And it all paid off.
And it all paid off.
Okay, so that was on the Sunday, the same day as London Marathon.
Yes.
The next day, so box ticked, the next day, British Athletics have their meeting where they discuss all the things you listed earlier. When did you find out and how did you find out?
I found out in the least glamorous way you can imagine, in a Fiat 500 rental car in a car park. So we had actually just landed in Mallorca and we were driving out and my phone rings. It's British Athletics.
Oh my God, was your heart like... I think my stomach would be in my mouth. Yeah.
I literally was like, I can't answer it. And Charlie was like, swipe, answer. So that was how I found out. They just said, I've got some great news for you. You've been selected for Paris. And I literally screamed and cried.
To be expected. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Charlie must have. Well, did he know? Did he have it on loudspeaker? Could he hear?
Well, I then put it on loudspeaker, but
Okay.
Judging by my reaction, it was just like Charlie was in tears. So it was, I have no idea what the people around us in this parking lot thought. But
I'm sure they were happy for you as well.
Yeah, it was a very, very emotional day. And then there's actually, the hard bit is that you then have to wait. So there's an appeals process where people can appeal against the decision, and then
on the selection panel, or because who else knows at this point?
Other athletes who are in contention, because everyone gets a notification of whether they've been selected or not been selected.
Yeah.
So they can appeal, and then it has to go to the Olympic Association for ratification. And realistically, it's one of those things that like your sensible mind knows that it's going to be fine. And the ratification is literally, I mean, I doubt it's ever not been ratified. It's like, if I don't have a passport or I am not British, then I can't go. But there is that waiting process of like, oh God, is it going to be okay?
And it was.
And it was.
Yeah. So did you let yourself celebrate? You were in Mallorca. Did you allow yourself to celebrate, or was it then just straight into, right, I'm now training for the Olympics, head down?
I did. I was planning an easy week anyway because I'd raced and it had been a bit of a hectic build-up. So I was planning a week of just easy running. Mm-hmm. I actually felt all right after the race, to be honest, but I did take that week and I was like, I'm going to need it because I got some hard work to do. So it was very sensible in Mallorca. Just did lots of lovely running along the beachfront, got out on the bike, and just enjoyed it for a week. Like no training plan, had some great seafood, and yeah, just had a really nice time actually. It was a bit of a crazy week back. A lot of lovely messages, including from our wonderful listeners, and a bit of media and things. So it wasn't completely kind of downtime, but it was very nice to just enjoy running and soak it all up.
Yeah, so exciting. So when this episode is released, I think it's going to be about 14 weeks until the marathon. So have you had a think about what this block's going to look like, how you're going to approach it? Is it going to be similar to past marathon builds? I know you say you sometimes struggle at the beginning of a marathon block because it's the patience of kind of building into it. So do you have a plan?
Paris is going to be a bit different to other marathon build-ups because it's a very different course and a very different type of racing. So for Chicago, it was so focused on time. It's a flat course, so it was very much running pretty much the same pace throughout. I mean, trying to pick it up at the end, but you don't have huge hills to deal with. Paris is hilly, it's hot, and it's a championship. So it's, to be honest, not really even about the time. The time could be anything. So it's going to be a very different challenge, but I'm really excited about it because I think I'm ready to do something a bit different. If I was just doing another fast marathon and trying to knock time off my PB, I'm not sure I'm quite ready to do that just yet. And actually I need something different and refreshing and just a bit of a different, just mix it up a bit. It's going to be fun. So training is, I mean, it's not going to be my training plan. I'm not going to be dramatically changing anything, but definitely incorporating a bit of hill work, building up that ability. The uphills, to be honest, are just fitness. So not too worried about that, but it's the downhills that I've really got to make sure I prepare for. And most importantly, the ability to run fast off the downhills. So getting my legs really prepared for that, doing lots of specific S&C, gym work, and then just practicing.
Yeah, from experience, definitely practice the downhills.
Yeah, I'm going to be needing some tips.
Yeah, get those quads ready. Okay, so then what about goals for the actual race? I mean, it's an Olympic marathon. Everyone's there to obviously place as high up as they can against the best in the world. So do you have any idea of what you want to aim for? You just see what happens?
My biggest aim really is to just give it everything. And I want to walk away just knowing that I gave my absolute all, go out, be brave, roll the dice and just give it everything. I mean, top 10 would be absolutely insane. I think if I had an incredible day, then it's possible. And that's the brilliant thing about A, the Olympics and championship racing, and B, the very different course. I think anything is possible. I mean, you look at Molly in Tokyo. I don't think she would mind me saying this. Going into it, I'm not sure anyone expected her to get bronze, and anything can happen.
Yeah, I think she's a great example for just, like you say, anything can happen. Just don't rule yourself out.
Exactly. And if you can just capitalize on the conditions, the course, and be able to be really strong in that last 10K, you can really do some damage to the other competitors and place quite high up.
Well, it's just so exciting. I will definitely be there. I'm already planning my trip to cheer you on, and I'm sure everyone listening is going to be cheering you on all the way as well. It's just such an incredible achievement.
Oh, thank you. And of course, we will be catching up on a weekly basis to give more of a debrief and behind the scenes on the road to Paris.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the journey.
Thanks for joining us for 5 Miles Easy.
See you next time.